Wacile Levandowski was born on January 7, 1909, to Otto and Amelia. He was born in a small village in the Ukraine near Truskowitz. Wacile was born into a Polish family with strong Jewish values. His father was a very successful lawyer who also wrote for the local paper for his personal enjoyment. His mother had her hands full with all 7 children and maintaining a home. When Wacile was 10 years old, their family decided to move back to Poland to be closer to his grandparents who were ill. The transition was easy for him and his family. They moved to the town that his parents grew up in. He had many cousins and family members to rely on, and felt right at home. As Wacile grew older, he began to notice his father's passion for helping his community, and he admired his father a great deal. He began to read his father's law books and found himself surprised at how much he had loved them. He attended law school at the University of Warsaw and graduated at the top of his class. Wacile began working at his father's firm. He married the love of his life, Analia. They had 2 beautiful boys and one on the way. His sons Otto and Mikołaj were hoping for another brother. Wacile and his father were very successful within their firm, inside and outside of their Jewish community. They were well liked by everyone, and many families knew that they could be trusted. In 1929, the stock market crashed, marking the beginning of the Great Depression, which lasted 12 years. It had adverse effects on many business owners, including the Lewandowskis. While they remained in business, their firm took a hard hit. Many clients could no longer afford to pay them, and they often did work with the hope of reimbursement. In 1933, Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany. Through various uses of propaganda, Hitler convinced many Germans that the reason for all of the nation's troubles was due to the Jewish community. He infected Germany and Europe with feelings of anti-Semitism that were wildly inaccurate. On April 1st, Nazis staged a boycott of Jewish shops and businesses. Nazis stood outside and held signs that said, "Don't buy from Jews, shop in German businesses." This was only the beginning. Within a few years, Jews were prohibited from being newspaper editors, banned from the German labor front, denied health insurance, could no longer get legal qualifications, and they were banned from the military. As time went on, they lost more and more of their rights. Wacile and his family began to feel concerned for Germany. Wacile had terrible thoughts of Nazis coming to Poland and hurting his family. He started watching over his boys and Analia more closely, making sure he knew where they were at all times. He made his parents move into the same house as him to keep them close. As time went on, injustices began to hit closer to home. Polish descendants in Germany were now being excommunicated and banned from the country. Jews could no longer own land, and they had to register all of their wealth and property. Jews were required to have an identity card and wear the Star of David so that they could properly be identified by the Gestapo. On September 1st of 1939, the Nazis invaded Poland, and Wacile's worst fears became true. Despite the family's financial burdens, Wacile was hiding money away. He had been waiting in agony for this day to come. The very next day, Wacile shipped his wife and children off to family friends in the Ukraine. Once they arrived, they soon began devising a plan to move farther away from Germany. They wanted to be as far as humanly possible. Wacile stayed in Poland with his mother and father. He began to feel empty inside, as if a part of him was lost. They tried to live their lives in a state of normalcy, but no one could ignore the brutal reality. Their house would soon be invaded, their belongings ripped apart in front of them by barbarians, herded like cattle into ghettos and camps. Are they be sent to the left or right to have their destiny decided for them? To be shot, gassed, or beaten, stripped down to their naked bodies and scalded all for being Jewish. The genocide had begun. Wacile began to curse the God he once loved. He wanted nothing more than to see the face of his beautiful wife. He would give anything just to speak to her. He could not even write to her because he feared that they would be found. He did not know if they were safe or if they were even alive. On November 10th in 1940, Wacile awoke to loud, ear-piercing sirens and the shrill screams of children. He knew. He knew what was about to happen. It was a reality that he had been trying to escape. His father Otto stood in the doorway staring at Wacile with the most stoic look he had ever seen. His father began to tremble as the door behind him burst open, knocking him to the ground. Otto, Amelia, and Wacile were taken to a ghetto in Warsaw, where they stayed for 5 days, and suffered from dehydration and malnutrition. Then they had to march to a concentration camp that was 3 miles away, where they were split into groups. As Wacile was being transported to the showers, he turned for one last glimpse at his mother and father. As he turned, he heard a shot that resonated into his chest. He watched his mother's head explode into pieces, as his father began to yell as he was shot in the stomach, falling into a ditch where he eventually took his last breaths. For the first time in 2 months, Wacile felt something other than numbness. He felt rage, sorrow, and agony. The next 5 years were a broken haze. Wacile became a slave to the Nazis, doing hard labor in return for heartache and despair. Not only did he feel nothing emotionally, but he had physically gone numb. The cold winters had shriveled his youth, and the beatings brittled his bones. He let his mind wander to an unknown dark place where he no longer could think, hear, or utter even a simple word. He had become a shell. His love for life and humanity had left long ago with his family. In 1945, the Americans fled into Nazi-stricken land and freed thousands and thousands of Jews, one of them being Wacile. As he was yanked out of his cement cell that was filled with the odors of defecation and decomposition, he thought it had finally happened. He thought that he had finally died. As he came to his senses, he realized that he was being herded by people speaking an unfamiliar language. He felt disoriented and scared. He knew that he could not survive much else, so he began to run back to his cell. He was running as fast as he could when he stopped. He heard someone yelling in German. He stood there and began to tremble. He thought to himself, "No, it's another ruse. It can't be. I'm free? I have forgotten what it is to be free. What is it to be free?" he asked himself. He immediately thought of Analia. He had forgotten her face. For so many nights he longed to see her and forced himself to forget her, and the image just came rushing back to him within a moment. He fell to his knees and began to sob. A soldier came alongside him and picked him up. The soldier carried him to the train and assured him that everything would be fine. Wacile searched for his family for 6 months before moving to America. He tried to contact family, friends, clients, anyone who would have possibly known where they were. He found nothing. Everyone was split up. No one had families or communities or jobs to just go back to. They all had nothing, and they were all searching for someone. So eventually he moved. He thought that maybe they had never made it to the Ukraine, that the Gestapo stopped them along the way. He thought the worst. While in America, he started working in a factory. It was very different than being a lawyer, but he was able to clothe, house, and feed himself. The only thing he desired was his family. There was not a day that went by that he did not dream of Analia. He thought of her touch, her scent, her hair, her beautiful eyes, all of the wonderful meals she used to cook and how she cared for his children. One day after work, he stopped by the market to pick up groceries to make borscht. Wacile hated borscht, but it was Analia's favorite dish to make. Wacile was standing in an aisle and he heard a woman yell out names very earnestly. "Otto, Mikolaj, where are you boys?" Again she yelled, "Otto, Mikolaj, you are not funny." Then she yelled again, "Otto, Mikolaj, Wacile." Wacile stood idly in the store as he stared at this woman with tears running down his face. He said, "They are over here." The boys were wrapped in his arms, and as she turned around, she saw the man that rescued her from a great tragedy.